from Tubby Tarot, and this is Book Chat. So I was chatting to a friend on WhatsApp the other day, and I was telling him about how excited I was to get my big delivery of books. I was telling him about it, that I had like this amazing book called David Copperfield by Charles Dickens was sent to me, and it had like this fantastic new cover. And I had an amazing book called The Castle of Otranto, which was sent to me, and it was the story about this dark castle. So I was carrying on, and he was just like, I heard this like there was this like gap in our messaging, and then eventually he said, "What is your obsession with Victorian literature? What is your obsession with stuff that was written in the Victorian time?" And I got to thinking about this because it was so hard to say to him. It was so difficult to kind of articulate myself and say, well, you know what, I really enjoy it because this, this, and this. And so what I thought about it, and I thought it's actually quite an interesting topic. Let me tell you why I'm so fascinated by the Victorian era and the culture and the literature. So I'm going to mention three reasons, probably three main reasons why I'm obsessed with Victorian culture and literature and everything. I'm fascinated by the era because it was an era of incredible industrial advancement. So there were so many things that were being advanced. For instance, one of the things was electric light was invented, and something we take completely for granted is electricity. But during the Victorian era, they would use gas lamps, okay? And only near the end of the Victorian era, the late Victorian era, was electricity freely available for the masses. Now, you must remember the Victorian era spanned was from 1837 till about 1901. So it was a long time ago, and there were so many really cool inventions, and because of this industrial explosion, okay, the amount of amazing sci-fi and sort of fantasy novels and books and that sort of thing that were written, that's where it all started. That's where all sci-fi books and all sort of what do you call them, like detective novels and all the stuff, the P.D. James, the Patricia Cornwell, all the stuff you guys read now, all kind of started in that era. It was an era of newness, an era of experimentation, and to me that was all really, really exciting. So that's the one reason I really enjoy the Victorian era and that time space. The other reason I really, really, really enjoy reading Victorian literature is because of the language. The Victorians spoke English, obviously, and Victorians, but let's put it this way, the English they spoke is very different to the English you and I speak. Similar, but very different. Their sentence structure, the way they would say things, was very different. Don't get me wrong, it's not as bad as when Shakespeare was around, okay? It's not quite Shakespeare or Chaucer, but it certainly is very different, and to us, Victorian English sounds very, very formal, okay? But that's what I love about it, is the way their sentences are constructed is so completely different to the way we speak now, that it puts you into a completely different state of mind. And that is what I really, really like when reading stuff that was written in the 1800s. Without even looking at the story that I'm reading, I'm looking at the actual language. The Victorian language is very exciting to me. Some may find it incredibly boring. Some of you might even find it very, very difficult to get into, okay? But for me, it takes me out of today's environment and it puts me into a world that is, it's more fantastical than Harry Potter, I promise you. All right, I know. Okay, so the third and final reason I adore Victorian literature is that it was a time of the true classic book, okay? Yes, we can all say that, I don't know, one of those books that I read recently was a book called something about the Strange Affair of the Dog in the Nighttime, correct me if I'm wrong. And yeah, it was a fantastic book, it was very different, but and we say, oh, it's going to become a classic. What I like about the Victorian era is the books are classics. That is when all the classic books were written. And not only things like the Bronte sisters and Charles Dickens, which are really heavy Victorian literature. I mean, I battle because I found it very dense. I'm not a huge fan of that. But not only that kind of writing. But things like horror, you'd be amazed. Horror and terror books, there's a difference between horror and terror. Those started out becoming popular in the Victorian era. Sci-fi, you just look at Jules Verne, who was a French writer, and H.G. Wells, who was a British writer. Their stories, their science fiction stories are amazing. They're amazing. They are the forefathers of modern sci-fi. So, you know, there's that. There's the beginning of crime novels. A book by Wilkie Collins called The Moonstone was the very first locked room mystery. Okay, it's one of the books that are regarded as the very first crime mystery. So all these genres originated. They come from Victorian times, because that's when all this really cool stuff was going on, this industrial revolution, technological advancement, that sort of thing. So that is another reason why I love Victorian literature, because when you talk about a classic book, most people immediately associate it with the Victorian era, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Frankenstein, what do you call that, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Lady Audley's Secret. These books are so ingrained in our psyche, and yet we don't actually realize that they were the rock bed, the cornerstone of so much. If it wasn't for Bram Stoker's Dracula or La Fernu's Carmilla, you wouldn't have Anne Rice doing her whole Lestat thing. So those are the three reasons why I'm fascinated by Victorian literature and the Victorian times. Okay, now you know. I'm Matt from Tubby Tarot, and this has been Book Chat. I'll see you next Thursday.